It's time to pick a Popcak. And we already have a Popcak in mind for this morning because she's bringing some answers to a really important issue right now. It's Rachel Popcak Isaac. Good morning to you, Rachel. So good to have you with us this morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
I know that what is going on with parents right now, particularly as we come to the end of a school year, so much happening in the world and so many questions going on, so much difficulty going on around us. Worry can really affect the way our brain functions and how we feel as a parent. From a mental performance perspective, how can parents become more empowered and effective in responding rather than reacting with their children?
As you're mentioning, right there, and as parents, I think there's a lot of reasons that we can feel stressed. I think one of the main kind of underlying causes of our anxiety is often due to the effects of future thinking. So future thinking really occurs when we basically witness our child's behavior in the moment, and our brain immediately jumps to, the visual or the thought of them, quote unquote, acting like this when they're a teenager or an adult, and this is gonna be like who they turn into, essentially, right? And this vision of the future kind of triggers our threat response in our brain, making us feel like we need to stop the behavior right now to prevent them from acting that way or becoming that type of person in the future. But since future thinking triggers our threat response in our brain, it really makes us reactive rather than responsive. So it's really important for us to remember that there's a whole person in front of us right now with their own feelings, challenges, thoughts that we need to respond to relationally. And when we acknowledge the person in the present moment, we can be a lot more empathetic, recognize the need or the feeling that's behind the behavior that we're seeing in the moment, and focus on working with our child in the moment to respond differently, to help them learn the skills that they need to handle frustration more effectively, and even model the type of behavior that we want to see from them. Operating from the present moment really helps us to be a lot more effective and feel more empowered as a parent, because the present moment is where we can actually make a difference. Reacting from that place of future thinking, it just causes us to feel powerless, causes us to feel fearful and really escalated, which ends up working against us and our goal rather than for us. So responding in that present moment can really be challenging, but with practice and with prayer, like, Lord, help me to pause and remember the child that you've placed before me right now. Help me to respond with love, with empathy and understanding, to love them and to lead them in the way that you want me to. We are able to break that cycle of future thinking, and we can respond a lot more effectively rather than reactively.
Rachel, do you find that future thinking is not just something that is a part of how you raise your kids or interact with your kids, but is it, some people have, tried to claim that's a personality trait, right? That I'm just a worrier, or I'm just a, is there a, an overall kind of arching perspective of how we engage the world, and then that flows over to how we engage our kids? Or do you see it only in the way we deal with our children?
No, 100%. I think you're absolutely right on that, because, and again, it goes back to how our brains are wired. So our brains are wired for safety, like, point blank period. That's it. Like, end of the sentence. That they're not wired for growth. They're not wired for health. They're not wired, right, and for success, like any of those sorts of things. They're just wired for safety, which means our default is to think of that worst case scenario, to, flash to that, future thinking like we're talking about. But just because that's our instinct doesn't mean that that's actually helpful or even really evidence of what's actually going to happen or how capable we actually are. Because that idea of that future thinking or thinking of that worst case scenario is just that it's our limbic system's response. It's that fight, flight, freeze response saying, there's a potential threat here. Just get away from the threat. Do whatever you need to do to get away from the threat. And so we act, again, really reactively. But in reality, when we can kind of pause and say, hold on a second, where am I in this present moment? What do I know is true right now? And also, what strengths do I have that can help me be effective, right? And again, that's where we can kind of say, Lord, help me to see all of that and recognize the strengths that I have to be effective so that I can respond in that more empowered and effective and capable way. So yeah, this future thinking, this type of just kind of jumping to that sort of fear-based thought or that worst case scenario is very much kind of instinctual because our brain's just trying to protect us. But that doesn't mean that we have to get stuck there. And actually, we have a lot more power than we give ourselves credit for.
That's good stuff, because when we react, we really lose perspective, right? And when we take the time to reflect a little bit and then respond, it's much more informed response.
Exactly. It's that shift from kind of that clarity, which comes from that thinking part of our brain, our cortex, versus that, kind of reactive, my brain can't tell the difference between, my child having, a meltdown and like a bear attacking me, right?
Yeah.
It's all a threat. It's all, a threat to my life and I have to get away from it. And so, yeah, being able to kind of take that pause, say a prayer, and then respond to be able to say, like, first of all, I'm safe and I can handle this.
Yeah.
And obviously, I mean, the scripture itself speaks of it. Jesus himself, the lilies of the field, the birds of the air. But boy, doesn't make it easy, does it? I mean, it's still difficult because, as you said, our brains are wired in this way. So we are actually overcoming what's natural to us to come into a need for supernatural grace to overcome that thing.
Right. And it is hard, but it's absolutely possible to essentially retrain our brain, to teach our brain, hey, I can handle this. I can respond differently. I can be more empowered in these situations. And so being able to, as much as possible, trying to, pause and respond in the moment, even if that doesn't happen, you're going to have those moments of reactivity. You can still go back and either go back to your kid and say, hey, I'm sorry, I freaked out on you like that. Or after the fact, you can kind of even rethink the scenario and say, okay, if I were to do that again, here's how I would handle it. And you practice that pause and that prayer. So we're not just living reactively, but even when we react, we're still taking that time to redo and respond.
Sorry I reacted like that, kid. I should have slapped you twice, not once. Rachel, Isaac, thank you so much.
Take care, Rachel.
Thank you for having me.